Hello and welcome to Creative with Money, a masterclass on personal finance for the creative sector, which is you. It's being brought to you by Minding Creative Minds and Moneycube.ie, proud supporters of Irish Pensions Awareness Week. See pensionsawarenessweek.ie for the full lineup of events. And thank you to Iconic, another supporter, for this lovely space. Let us meet our experts and find out what they do. First of all, welcome Kim O'Callaghan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us today. I've been working in the live events industry for over 10 years. I work primarily on outdoor events, on large-scale events like Slane, Croke Park, RDF, Porky Queeve shows, and I've been director with Minding Creative Minds for the last just over a year since it started. And yeah, looking forward to the chat today. And
so a busy last 18 months despite everything.
Yes, it's been a very challenging 18 months for everybody in the industry actually, and it's great now to see that, you know, there's a glimmer of hope and things are starting to like progress, and you know,
we're face to face.
I know,
exactly. Rather than virtual.
Exactly.
Barry.
Hi Stuart, I work with LBM, that's Livewire Business Management. We're based out of Limerick, and we act as business managers primarily to musical acts, so we're effectively accountants to artists, bands, etc.
Olive Ryan, welcome.
Hi, thanks very much, Stuart. I work with Moneycube, so we are the financial advisor end of the conversation today. I've been working in financial services industry for over 20 years. But it's really interesting working with the likes of Barry and Kim today to talk about the other side of financial services that we can help with the creative industry as well.
Lovely. Before we talk about finance, Kim, you're busy again booking gigs that might actually happen.
I know, very exciting. Finally, it's been a long time coming, but yeah, it's great that there is shows being booked in that we know, as you said, will go ahead. And yeah, it's like an exciting time ahead. I think people have been through a very tough time, but I think there's a huge appetite both within the industry and with the public for events to come
the
back.
pent-up demand for gigs is huge, isn't it?
Unbelievable, like it's just incredible, and I really think it's going to be an incredible, you know, once the event starts and people start getting back out.
You were saying it will be a bumper 2022.
Yes, it's going to be an incredible 2022. It's a very busy summer for 2022 for the outdoor season, but even prior to that, it's going to be very busy, like with events that are happening. And yeah, it's going to be incredible after such a long time.
That is good news. Down to money. At what point, Barry, should a band or solo artist seek financial advice?
Well, very often when they're starting out, our first advice would always be to rigor themselves around finance. So our first suggestion would always be to open up a separate bank account just for this activity. Maybe feed a credit card off it, and that way you can, all of the income and all of the expenses can all wash through one bank account. That'll maintain artists for so long, and I think once significant amounts of money started to accrue, then you need to give consideration to taxes and other compliances as well. So the spreadsheet approach will work, but I think if artists find themselves with more questions than answers, then they probably may need to meet with a finance professional. Right,
so obviously quite early on. I think one of the mantras when you're starting and all along is keep receipts.
Indeed, I think when an artist is starting off, I mean, there's often a large input on the expense side, whether it's equipment, touring, travel. Before they start to make money, they will incur expenses, and they can be used to offset against future income as long as there's a proper record being kept of those. So it's important that everything is kind of maintained in good order, and if you have to work with a finance professional, that you can give them books and records that will make sense immediately, and that will enable the artist in the long run to avail of any tax benefits that there may be.
It seems a bit boring and not very rock and roll, but it's essential, isn't it?
Well, you know, it's we are at the kind of the side of it where I suppose we're seen as a necessary evil, but really, you know, an accountant can ultimately save you money if you approach it in the right way. So it's important that you have some business semblance of exactly what's going on. It is the music business, so there is that element of it as well. It's not just about the creative. An artist that step forward and take responsibility for their own finances are showing that entrepreneurship to enable them to make key budgeting decisions as their career moves forward.
And obviously, if you've got the finance in order from day one, there is more time to be creative. You're not worrying about other headaches.
I could give you two examples. One, I suppose, is the artist coming to us with the books and records. Everything is easy to look at. It's enabled, and we can make sort of key decisions. The other side of it, which we've seen, is artists who come to us after the event. They come to us because they've had a letter from Revenue, as an example, and they might have been working in the industry 3 or 4 years. Revenue now wants 3 or 4 years records. And suddenly it's a large expense for the artist to have to engage a finance professional to then start looking through various different bank accounts for different payments and receipts that are there, trying to compile all of that. The more that the artist can do themselves at the outset, the better it is for them.
It's a bit like the dentist, go regularly rather than having a nasty shock after 3 or 4 years of not tending to your finances.
Be aware of it, I think, and understand that, you know, that there is, you have to give commitment to this element of it as well. Don't let a problem build up. Often people will turn away or they'll shy away from it, but ultimately it will come and surface at one stage, and it's likely to bite you in the bum if you haven't dealt with it properly previously.
Olive, could you explain a bit how Moneycube.ie sort of fits into this jigsaw? What do you bring to the party?
Yeah, so I suppose what Barry's company would do with the artists is the starting point, and when they have reached the stage that they actually have excess money that they can use to invest or achieve the best possible outcome for that money, that's where we would step in. So we might get referred from Barry's company to talk to that artist about how they might use their money, and what we do is we try and make sure that they have an outlook of a different set of pots for the money, so that they have taken care of the day-to-day, that they have the rainy day fund, which is something that you keep in your bank account and have access to, and then after that you can look at investments, and we would always put pensions into that pot as well, because that's basically a long-term investment, So, but we try to divide it up so that there's different time frames for different amounts of money, so that there's access when you need it, but you're also making the most of the benefits of investment, long-term investment, the tax benefits that come with pensions, which I don't think a lot of people are aware of. That can help with the offsetting the tax return that Barry mentioned earlier. So, and there are lump sum payments coming out of that when you retire that are tax-free. So that's the kind of advice that we would be talking to people about, and making sure that what we offer and what we can find for them suits their needs and suits their type of investment approach. So we look at it, it's very much tailor-made kind of service that we try to offer for everyone.
Kim, you're working with bands every single day. Do you think they're aware enough of what's available or what they should be doing? Do you get a sense that they're tuned in properly, or could more be done?
Yeah, I think it's very mixed actually, and I think it's a bit of a minefield for people, which is why it's great to have services like that there, that like people can get something, as you said, tailored specifically to suit them. So I do think it's very mixed. Some people would be aware, but I think the vast majority really aren't. Prior to obviously COVID hitting, it's such a fast-paced industry. Like obviously we've been stopped for the last 18 months, but people have been so busy and everything. So I think this is a great opportunity now, before it gets busy again, for people to stand back and just really look at it and start planning. Like at the moment they may not be in a position for like those investments and savings and that, but to know that, plant the seed and be aware that the services are there when they need them and to reach out.
Barry, from your point of view, this obviously is daunting for some creatives. It's daunting for me. People can come to you and have an initial consultation for free, and you'll walk them through it?
Yeah, indeed. We'll always sit down and talk with people initially, just to get an overview of their circumstances. They can be very different for different people. A rash sort of decision that somebody could make is, on receiving a recording advance, they could go out and buy a sports car. I mean, that's one side of it that we see. And they are generally the people that will end up with tax problems down the line, and we end up having to unwind things for them retrospectively. What we'd like to do in that type of scenario with a band is to sit them down and understand, okay, look, this is a recording advance. You've got commissions to pay out of that, okay? So let's ring fence that. You got to pay your manager. There's going to be costs as well, and you're going to have taxes. So all of these things need to be acknowledged, that it's not all your money straight away. Then you're left with that chunk of change, and after that you should be budgeting for how long that needs to last for, because the next significant amount of income may not come either it may be from touring, or if the record sells well, there may be record royalties, but that could be some time down the line. So if people are rash and spending the money up front, they're not really taking control of their finances, and they're not making those key budgeting decisions that they should be doing. So what we'd like to think we offer is to give them a steer in and around that, and to enable them to understand, well, yes, you might have this one lump sum that's just landed, but think of the wider picture here.
I know as a journalist, when you talk to bands where it's gone wrong, record company advances is one of the major stumbling blocks. It does seem like, wow, this is a big chunk of money for us.
It can be a perfect storm, because generally the artist will be quite young. They're coming out of, I suppose this is their first money experience, because they're moving away from the rehearsal studios or the bedroom, whatever it might be, and suddenly there's an advance of money there. Yeah, the attitude towards it can be convoluted sometimes, and we just try and give them enough advice to enable them to make the correct decisions.
Olive, you obviously have an expertise in the music industry. Generally, if you're trying to find the right financial expert, I mean, do you just get it, like, the golden pages don't exist anymore, but whatever the online equivalent is, I mean, how do you find the right financial expert?
Well, there are actually a lot of, online tools now have developed so well in the last number of years. Moneycube itself is an online organisation that we are very prominent online. But there are websites. There's a Brokers Ireland is an organisation that has a website that helps people find an advisor. So you can go onto that website and you can search in your location, and whoever is a member of that organisation, like Moneycube are, you will be able to locate it. But most brokers and our financial advisors in Ireland are there. But even if you just typed in financial advice onto the website, onto a Google search or a web search, you will find most financial advisors have moved online and are available to be found. And a lot of them can operate online as well, because we've had, like, the last 18 months, we haven't been able to meet people face to face, which would have been the normal kind of scenario for that kind of conversation. Now it's so much easier to meet people. You can do it from your home,
So you could be touring Malaysia.
You could.
And check in with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really broadened that opportunity for people to talk to an advisor and an expert very easily.
Now, must stress that actually we've been talking about musicians, but Kim, there's a huge, as we know, infrastructure, thousands of people working around the artists. So obviously, particularly freelance people in the industry need to be aware of this too.
Yeah, and I think, like I was saying, it's been such a fast-paced industry, like that. A lot of times, people, they just don't quite get around to, like, looking at, all the ins and outs and all the saving aspects that they need to look at, and proper budgeting. Like, some people, don't get me wrong, are incredible at it, but I definitely think there's a very wide variety within the industry, not just artists. So in terms of, like, production and even from, like, TV, literature, all the whole creative sector that I think can really benefit from the services like that Barry and Oliver are talking about.
And it must be very complicated for people who accrue, because they're working across different tax regimes.
Yeah, exactly, and that's it, and that's why I think getting more specific, like, advice is really important for them, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, so, like, you've got elements. So in terms of if artists are touring, there's obviously international aspects to take into. Then you've got, like, crew that could be here, they could be touring as well, and it's that also, like, it can be very sporadic as well, so you can have very seasonal work. So, like, in terms of that budgeting and planning, like, there's a lot of different elements. So everybody within the industry has different aspects that they need to look at.
So Barry, you must be aware, and on top of what, dozens of different tax regimes.
Yeah, it's interesting that when artists go off and tour into Europe, for example, each country will have its own nuance. Certain countries you'll be able to get the full guarantee out tax-free, but for many other countries there are strict regimes and procedures to be followed for each particular country. France, Italy, Spain, all of these type of things, and again, bands, artists coming to us, often they come when there's a trigger event. So for example, somebody could be going into touring in France and Italy and finding out, okay, I've got all of this paperwork, suddenly I don't know what I'm doing anymore, because it's quite intricate. They're asking me for A1s, they're telling me I'm going to get 45% taxes withheld, but I could split the contracts. It's a minefield, but again, there's simple solutions to all of these. So again, it's talking to the professionals, seeing what's right for you, and getting the assistance, because again, ultimately you can save money by doing all this.
We'll talk about the B word, Brexit, in a moment. They come to you, for a free consultation. What questions should an artist or a freelancer be asking their financial expert or prospective financial expert? And also, what questions will you ask them, Olive?
So I suppose the questions that we would always start with is that they, like I was saying earlier, we do look at making sure that they have their money put into pots where there's a very short-term need, and that's your rainy day fund. And then after that, we do look at what plans they have, and where would they be looking for money in the future? What expectations have they for expenses in the future? And we look at it maybe on a 5, 10, and then longer term than that. And we try and split their money into pots in that sense. So that's the kind of questions that we need them to be ready with. What kind of plans do you have? What expectations do you have coming up? And then we can plan around that.
You're nodding, Barry.
It's such a fickle business, and one of the big obstacles we see is, I guess, artists are just they have a fear of commitment almost to future finances, and you can kind of understand that in one way, because artist careers can be very short-lived. An artist can have a career out of one song potentially, but there's other artists who they can try for many years and may not achieve that level of success that they set out to achieve. So because of that fear, I guess, there's always a worry that the income levels, while they may be good for a period of 3 or 4 or 5 years, that they may not sustain, and that if people are putting investments or putting money into pensions that are seen as long-term investments, that actually they're not going to know how they're going to live in 8 or 9 years' time, never mind 20 or 30. So there is those obstacles there, and again it's a uniqueness. It depends on the personality of the people as well, and how responsible they are with their finances, and that again will enable them to take a more proactive approach in regards to savings and investments.
Should an artist be able to read a spreadsheet?
I think so. It is a music business. There is that business side to it, and it's their money. I mean, for those reasons alone, I think they need to accept responsibility and not leave it to other people to look after. Very often we have managers knocking on our door saying, I had this client, they need their finances looked after, but the client won't do anything. I have to do this on their behalf. And we end up, meeting the client, but they may be averse to having those conversations about finance. We will still try and do as best we can with them, but what we'd like to see is them taking that step forward, accepting the responsibility, and understanding the basics. They don't need to go under the bonnet. They don't need to understand all the intricacies or learn all the terms. But a basic grasp of ins and outs and taxes, I think, will help.
I know obviously varies, but what do bands tend to do? Do they nominate a member to liaise with you? Would you have all 3 or 4 members of the band in? What tends to happen?
That varies, and that will depend on the personalities within the band, as an example. Generally, to streamline the process, we like to have one nominated person, and that person speaks to us on behalf of the band and enables us to make payments on the band's behalf. So we're not chasing 4 or 5 times approvals from the drummer who doesn't really know what this is for in the first place.
It's always the drummer you pick on, isn't it?
Actually, the drummers are quite good. They're not meticulous.
They can count.
Yeah, they can. So, but it varies from act to act.
Yeah.
But I think that's why conversations like this are really important, to try and, it's such an unknown to people, and it can be quite scary sometimes to just, people can be blinkered about it and say, I just don't want to think about it. Whereas if it's simplified for them, it's such an important to deal with it now, and then it just makes it so much easier long term for them. So.
No, I've known bands who fretted about finance and thought it's going to be really, I use the analogy of the dentist, and they go, it was actually quite painless. Mm-hmm. And I really can relax a bit now because I'm not worried about revenue letters, because revenue, let's be fair, can be reasonably aggressive, can't they, in pursuing monies?
Again, I suppose in their defence, what they're looking at is if people are due to submit income tax returns and don't file their returns on time, that's only a negative experience, and obviously revenue are going to come out, and it is going to feel harsh. but there's a reason why they kind of come out with these letters. And you know, if people, especially with the internet these days, you could nearly find a gig listing from people 4 or 5 years back. It's all available online somewhere. And if somebody has been shying away from it, not dealing with the taxes or not filing income tax returns, it can be a pretty awkward situation when revenue does come knocking on the door, and it is generally a negative experience.
So you can't be ignoring those polite reminders.
Yeah, you know, two things are certain in life, you know. So, you know, the taxes do have to be dealt with, and we just find that the more that the artist is in control of the finances and in summary and can understand the tax element of it, that they are enabled with their budgeting decisions. It just empowers them a bit more.
Something that's quite important to stress is that you're their financial expert, not the record companies or the managers.
Yeah, that's completely true. We try and make that clear, you know, from day one, that it's actually the artist who, you know, we report to. While we may be dealing with the manager on a day-to-day, that's because the manager is usually involved in the business background, negotiating contracts. We'll get the invoices, want to be raised and all of that, and we will act on all of those. But the manager can also go, and then suddenly, you know, it is back to the artist. So we try and make it clear from day one, it's your responsibility, you're paying our fees. You know, and while you may engage an artist, or engage a manager to deal on the day-to-day with us, it's always the artist.
Yeah. Olive, when should you start thinking about starting a pension scheme?
As soon as possible.
Right.
As soon as possible. Really it is, it's a bit like what Barry's saying about the rest of the finances and your analogy with the dentist. Like, the earlier you start thinking about something like that, the more opportunity you have for, like, it's an investment. So the long-term outcome of an investment is that it's going to grow, hopefully. So the earlier you can put money away, the more chance it has to grow before you're ready to start using it when you're planning a retirement. So yeah, always as early as possible. But look, there are you know, it's never too late either at the same time, you know. So there are tax advantages, as I mentioned before, and that's one of the things I think is really, when you're talking about the taxman and the revenue, there are benefits to use. You can use a pension to help with that tax return,
Right.
because you can offset against the income that you're earning for taxes. So it's always beneficial, like, to no matter what age you are. But we'd always say as early as possible. It's
That's interesting though, never too late. So
never too late. No, I'd always say that, never too late. Absolutely, yeah.
Barry, I need this, and I'm sure one or two people out there do too. The kind of dummy guide to artist exemption and how it works.
Okay, I mean, this is something that Irish residents can and should avail of, and it's for the creation of the work itself, so it's for the earnings specific to the songwriting. But it is there. It's currently 50k per annum tax-free. So if an artist, for example, was signing a publishing deal and they were offered 100k upfront, we'd be saying to them, why not split that over 2 years? Avail of the exemption. You get it in year one. 50% is effectively you're going to be paying tax on, 50% will be tax exempt. If you split that over 2 years, it's 100% tax exempt each year. So little things like that can make a big difference to people's finances. Because again, with songwriting, a bit like recording, the work, it's an advance, but the work needs to go out there, it needs to sell before royalties start coming through. And again, it can be many years before you'll see royalties flowing through. So to avail of something, a simple thing like that at the outset can be invaluable.
Has it worked really well, do you think, for artists?
Well, it has. You've got artists that you know, are strong songwriters, and they'll have income from a couple of different sources. IMRO would be one example, and perhaps their publisher as well. But again, the fact that you can have 50k in any 1 year, currently that's what the rate is, you know, it's invaluable to budgeting and finances, again, going back to enabling them to talk about investments and the future as well. So the more you can balance there and reduce the tax bill, then the better it is for the artist.
I'm very aware we're talking about 50k and this and that and touring, but for the last 18 months it's been extremely tough, and there will be people struggling, you know, with their mental health and everything else. Kim, can you tell us about Minding Creative Minds and the range of services and support you offer?
Yeah, that's a really good point actually. There's definitely people that will be listening in saying like, I'm not in a position to even think about saving at the moment. I'm just trying to keep my head above water, you know. So Minding Creative Minds was launched last summer, in the summer 2020, and it was always planned like that it was going to be launched pre-COVID, but then obviously we had to escalate it and bring it forward, because what's happened as a result of the industry just literally coming to a full stop, there's huge mental health implications for people. So like, and that's the thing about why it's good to start planning and like looking at your finances for people, because that can cause huge mental health implications for people. So like the services are there for, like in terms of Minding Creative Minds, there's the counselling services are there, but we also have, if you can call in, there's also legal advice, and there's business advice as well through Minding Creative Minds, and it's for the whole creative industry. So like today we're talking a lot from the artist front, but like I said earlier, there's like a lot of people on the production side that are like freelance, and they need to look at, you know, their plans, but like to utilize the situation they're currently in. So they may not be in a position to save at the moment, but how to best utilize the money they do have coming in at the moment to sustain them through this, you know, this period. And like it's positive that like work is starting to, you know, we're seeing shows to start coming back. So hopefully for people there's that light at the end of the tunnel, you know. But like through Minding Creative Minds, people can ring in and get assistance for like a variety of different things. So it's not just business related. Like they can obviously ring and get, you know, a session. They get a free 30-minute session on any topic. So that could be, you could get a session in terms of like tax or your VAT, but you could also maybe be applying for a mortgage and be having personal, you know, finances that you're trying to plan for, and they're counted as separate calls when you put them in. So.
And you've been having sort of monthly Zoom meetings and check-ins. Those have obviously been, I'd say, quite emotional on occasion.
They have, yeah, and people have really, like, it's such a social industry. So I think people, like, at the moment, over the 18 months, they've felt really disconnected from, like, you know, their colleagues or like their family quite often. So those Zoom calls have been really good to just feel people that like they can connect with others, and that it's that thing of even just chatting on the call. It's you know, quite a casual chat, but it makes people kind of resonate and go, well, it's, you know, others are in this situation, and you know, while they're like just, so a lot of people are on the PUP payment, and like, you know, today is a crucial day as well. They're planning, you know, the cuts for the PUP, and that's really daunting for people, because that cut is a huge impact for people, you know. So like that €50 cut can, like, you know, that's very challenging for people. So I think it's important for them to be able to like call into the likes of Minding Creative Minds, talk through it, and see is there a way that they can deal with their finances.
If anything good has come out of the last 18 months, it could be that sense of community amongst musicians and crew.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people have really, they've worked very well together to kind of look after each other within the industry, you know, and there is a lot of people in terms of they will kind of advise each other and help each other. So like people are becoming aware of services, like even with Minding Creative Minds, we found word has spread very quickly with people, you know. So like you see people posting just online that they're very openly saying, I've reached out, I've used these services, you know, and it's great to see that the services are there and people will openly talk about it, and there shouldn't be a stigma about it. You know, we all need, whatever stage somebody's at in terms of their career, their finances, we can all do with that bit of advice.
I suppose with this industry, it's the outrageous highs and matching lows, unfortunately. Barry, in your conversations with clients, how have the last 18 months been?
Been different for different clients. Obviously, touring has been stopped. That's been a big element of a lot of our artists. Coinciding with that, we found a lot of them seem to get more creative. There's a lot of them have gone back to the writing process and used the kind of downtime to develop. So I feel that we're in for a very creative 24 months of output on its way from all these different artists. You know, they adapted as well. There was the live streams again, as needs must. So it's been different, but I think we're at a stage now where we're glad to see the back of it. We want to see touring particularly return. We want to get that connectivity between the artist and the fans. That's been something that's missing, and no live stream can replace that. And you know, to get this normality back and onwards and upwards.
Olive, do you think that people are now more comfortable doing business online? It used to be a case of going to an office. You're obviously operating online.
Yeah.
Are people now more tuned into it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's every age group. I'm surprised sometimes about the varying differences between what you would expect people of certain age groups to prefer, and actually they're happy with the older generations are happy with working with people online. It's really developed over the last number of years. It's become the norm, really. So yeah, absolutely.
And also worth stressing that no question is too stupid. Just don't be frightened.
Oh yeah,
to...
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to ever ask anything.
Yeah.
I often say on that, I mean, if an artist doesn't understand the finances, well then maybe we're not explaining it properly.
Brilliant.
Keep asking the same question over and over again until you're comfortable with it, because again, they need to step forward, have the responsibility around their own finances, and absolutely no question is too stupid.
Brilliant. Olive, coming back to you, what are the best pension options for members of the creative industry?
Well, because there are so many varying options that are out there, because the income stream might not be regular, you can do things that are once-off payments, that you make when at the end of the year that you put into a pension that you can then match against the income from that year to offset taxes. But the variety that's out there is not just about how you pay it, it's also about what you can invest in as well. So there's so many opportunities for people who want to maybe choose certain fund types, certain type of industries that they want to put their money into. So there's a huge amount, but the fact is that it's very variable. There's basically an option that will suit every type of income stream. So it's really positive for people that they can choose.
It's an interesting thing because I can't think of too many industries where the income flow varies as much. Is there wriggle room? If you have a lean year, you can defer payments. I mean, how does it work on a practical level?
From my point of view, again, it's down to what are the contractual arrangements, and is there any wiggle room either with the record company or the publishing company? Again, that would be in a way that would suit the artist. So going back again, I mean, at the outset, once you have all of those expenses and the investment in your equipment and everything at the outset, make sure all of that is dragged through your career with you to be able to avail of those tax write-off when there are relevant income streams available. That's important.
Again, explain a bit more about tax write-offs. It sounds very tempting.
Well, I guess if you were to get an advance of 50k today, the taxman would look at that and say, well, I would like potentially 45% of that. What we would then try and do is say, well, okay, to get to this point, you actually had to invest a lot yourself in your own career to get to that. You had to develop, you had to get equipment and everything associated with that. All of those costs in the past, bring them with you, and suddenly you can offset them against the income, and now you're only paying tax on the profit rather than on the income amount.
Okay. As Kim was saying, it's a unique scenario, people coming off the PUP, trying to repair maybe a lot of damage that's been caused to their finance over the last 18 months. What are the questions you're being asked? What are the sort of scenarios you're seeing at the moment?
Generally, I think it's almost like a bomb has gone off. There's been this explosion and people just need to assess again, what does the future hold for them. I think using just production crew particularly as an example, I think when we started out with COVID back in March 20, I think we thought we would be locked up for maybe 2 weeks. And from the eyes of a production person, I suppose they look beyond that and think, okay, well, hopefully touring will continue in the summer, I'll be back and I'll be employed, it'll kick off again. And what's happened is that this has been kicked down the road time and time and time again to where we are today. We finally, I think that there is some proper light there.
Yeah.
But it's only now can they get their heads around what's happened retrospectively and begin to look forward as to the stability of work that the industry might sustain. Because up until now, there's been just no assurances of what's there. So it's all about the future.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, like to look at in terms of like the production end of it. Like for people, there's some people as a result of the way it's like panned out that they actually haven't worked since the summer of 2019, and now although it's great that like there is events starting to happen, granted at reduced capacity, there's still some personnel within the industry that they only work seasonal work in the outdoor season, so they've essentially missed 2021, like 2020, 2021 now as well, so they may not work until next summer, you know, so that's a huge challenge for people. And as you said, like at the outset, when people were looking at it initially, it was, people thought it was going to be a short space of time, you know, and a lot of people, you know, they had savings and they had planned for the rainy day, but when you're 2 years dipping into that fund for a rainy day, like, you know, that it dries up very quickly. So
what's been quite striking because of the nature of the business is how many sort of couples that the dual income from the industry, which is extra tough.
Absolutely, like, and that, I think that really shone a light on it actually, you know, and people weren't quite thinking about that, but like suddenly when the industry just ground to a halt, the realization kicked in that, you know, like I said, a lot of people in seasonal work, they may be busy from like April to September time, and they work really hard, you know, long hours and everything, and then they save well and they get through the winter. But when it happened that time in March, and I think that was a huge challenge for people as well, that was just coming into the outdoor season, so people would have been at their like lowest financially, anyone who works that seasonal work, so it was a huge challenge. They were just literally like heading into the summer to save, so definitely put a strain.
I can imagine, Olive, you've had to be extra flexible in terms of pension schemes and advice you're giving. Has it sort of changed somewhat the last 18 months, the conversations you're having?
Yeah, it has a bit. We've had, you know, customers who are like struggling like that, you know, who started payments to regular payments because, you know, they were comfortable with regular income coming, and now have had to either stop those payments and change to something more once off. But that's the beauty of it. There are opportunities to do that. But yeah, absolutely, there has been a change in the type of way that people are putting money away now, you know, and being a little bit more cautious as well, maybe putting more into having to put that rainy day fund first now because that's been depleted, like Kim was saying, and then think about pension investment in a year or two, you know.
Are you committing long term to a scheme, or if your circumstances improve or diminish, can you change quite easily?
Well, I suppose a pension is a long-term saving or investment, so you actually can't touch it until at least age 50, depending on what way it's set up. So it is long-term. The beauty of that is it's growing, so you know, so that's the good side of it. But if you need to stop, you know, you can stop contributions into it and then pick it up again. But what you put into it is there and it's growing away. So it's thinking about what you can really reasonably afford to do each year, and you do take it year on year, you know, and we help people with that every year to make sure that they're doing what they can. And as I said, there's tax relief, so the expenses that Barry was talking about earlier, when you're assessing like how much to deduct from that 50k advance that you got, a pension contribution is one of those. So you know, you can put money into a pension and claim it as an expense and get the tax offset then against it. So it can be a worthwhile option for people. It costs less than you think it will because of the tax relief. You know.
I'm not sure I really want to discuss this Brexit. We haven't really felt the effects because we've been in lockdown. It's our nearest neighbour. It's where musicians and crew often go to, first port of call. Barry, have you got your head round what it means for artists? It
really is an ever-evolving situation. Only until a few weeks ago, we weren't even sure if some tours that were scheduled would actually go ahead. They are going ahead now, touch wood. And with that, we're beginning to see these gremlins kind of surface, that whereas before, I guess they were anecdotal. The carnet is one example of those, and bands crossing the Irish Sea, going either way. Because of Brexit now, they need to have these visas for equipment. So basically, as you travel between countries, you need to come back with the equipment that you left with. You know, customs can be checking to make sure you haven't sold any equipment abroad or anything like that. What all of this means is, for the artist, of course, is that there's an additional cost on their budgeting line. Because now buying a carnet, before it was just a matter of shipping equipment from Dublin to London and getting it back again after the gig. Now there's a cost implicit with actually carrying this out. my concerns may be that it may be prohibitive if you've got these large touring acts with, very valuable equipment. The cost can be a direct amount of the value itself, and that will impact budgets. So that's the first thing we're beginning to see, and there's going to be many more issues as this all develops, but Brexit has only really seemed to cause issues from a touring perspective.
You kind of need to know what you're playing with before you roll off the ferry at Holyhead, don't you?
You need to be informed. The questions we're seeing now are coming in on a weekly basis. The Carney surfaced there a couple of weeks ago. We had to go and do a bit of research about it and thought, yeah, this is going to be problematic, and not every act will know about this at the moment. Some of them will be naive and they'll have their guitars and carrying them onto the plane themselves and get away, but all you need to do is stop once and there can be issues. So these are things that I suppose the production crew, once they start getting back to work and get their heads around what it is that is required from their aspect, there will be all these new challenges to deal with.
This has become even more of an issue with people taking normal jobs. How does it work if you're using your 9 to 5 to fund your creative career, or you're transitioning between the two maybe?
It'll depend on the circumstances, but often, artists start out, it starts out as a hobby in most. I don't think you go to bed on a Sunday night and you wake up Monday morning and you're a professional musician. It takes, there's a lead in time, and obviously you hone your skills over a particular period of time as well. So very often there'll be lots of costs initially as artists find themselves and they develop themselves before they are ready to either play in front of a live audience or start earning. So that's going to take a bit of time. Revenue will look at that and say, well, if you're working in the bank 9 to 5 and your hobby as a musician at the weekend is that, they don't really link the two at the start. But as you transition away from the 9 to 5 job and you become more of a professional and your income accelerates and you are more of a musician than you are working in the bank, I guess, then the whole thing changes on its head.
Kim, I think it's fair to say musicians were quite creative with finding other income sort of streams. Did you see that sort of artists going, right, I better get down to doing something?
Absolutely, it was amazing to see what people did do. People did find alternative ways, and while they were pushed into it, and some, with COVID, they did find other means of, income and what they could do. It's scary part though that we need to, it's great to see things coming back now, was that the more it went on, you started to see people kind of reassessing, going, maybe I should go out of the industry,
Yes.
And that's a huge concern. So that's why it's great to see things starting up now, because we were losing a huge skill set out of the industry as well, like on the production side as well as on the artists. So there was people freelance within the industry, or artists kind of, this was their career, and then they were looking at it going, maybe I should get, another job, or whether it was pressure, at home, in terms of paying mortgages, that they were being forced out of doing what they wanted, and they've trained their whole life for it, so that's been huge.
It's going to take a while, let's be honest now, for confidence to really come back, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, well, I do think it'll take a while, but I also think that it could be, it's going to be a bit of a slow burn initially. It's great to see from this week, that events are starting up, they're at reduced capacity, which that's not financially viable for a lot of places at the moment to do it. So there is still, while it looks like the industry, is up and going, for a lot of, businesses and for artists and everything, they're still not, they may not actually get back on their feet until about October, and then there's you have to deal with all the implications of what's happened. So I think it's going to be, it's a challenge to.
Olive, is it quite common now to have people who are doing a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 1 and then doing music for part of the year, so having that sort of hybrid career?
Yeah, I think it is, and I suppose I probably don't see as much of it maybe as Kim or Barry do, but there certainly are people coming to us that have, been building up that, they're coming to us when they're, I suppose, successful in that career choice. So they might have spent a lot of time doing another job that just paid the rent, and this was their passion that they were slowly building up, and when they get there, then that's when we get to talk to them. But it is certainly a common thing.
Now the conversation has sped by, we're near the finish line. Some final thoughts, Barry, just a parting shot to people watching.
I think out of COVID, there will be a positive reaction. I think people may have taken things for granted up to a point, And we're here today about awareness. And I think on the finance side, people realise that, well, actually nothing is certain, and maybe giving it due care and some thought and some planning in advance may put people in a better situation should anything like this ever happen again. That's, it is a fickle business, but if giving it thought and always thinking about the future can only be a good thing.
If somebody wants to talk to you, how do they go about it?
Go on lbm.ie. There's a messaging service there. Phone numbers are there as well. We're happy to talk to anybody anytime.
You're Limerick based, but you can do it online. It's always
absolutely
simple.
Yeah. We've a couple of people based here in Dublin as well on the royalty side of things, but we've an office in London. So Limerick is a base, but we tend to go and meet the clients wherever they need to. So yeah.
Kim, great positivity in that gigs are coming back. We're not going to have a festival season or a proper one, which is obviously horrible. You're not going anywhere though. Minding Creative Minds will continue for however long it needs to.
Absolutely, yeah. Minding Creative Minds services, like I said, were always originally intended to be put in place, but they just got escalated as a result of COVID. And I think it's important for people to realise that currently people are in kind of crisis mode and they're dealing with the current situation. But Minding Creative Minds will be there even when people get back working and they're up and they're touring, for any of those extra resources that they need. And as I said earlier, it's there's the counselling services are really crucial as well, for people that if they feel that they need to talk to somebody. But today's been really just about talking about in terms of their planning and their budgeting and business. I think if people assess that and deal with their finances, that will take a lot of stress and pressure off them. But I guess today, I just kind of like to reassure people that there is the services of Minding Creative Minds there, and if you reach out and if you're feel that you need additional assistance, just contact directly, and it's gonna as it'll develop as as things develop over the next while.
I've several musician friends who've used your counselling. Unfortunately, although it's great it's there.
Yeah.
And the one thing they said to me was the counsellors, the nuance, they understand the industry. It's not one size fits all. They get what we're going through.
Yeah, and we've been, like I said, Minding Creative Minds is so focused on the whole creative sector, which is a challenge in itself as well because it's so varied. But we've tried to make a point that there is that understanding for the industry, because what people within the creative sector are going through is very different sometimes to real life situations, so it's not that one size fits all the time. And that's as I said, if people contact and they go to use the services and they feel that there's extra assistance that they need, or there's something more specific to them, just let us know. And we're trying to really develop it over time, and we even launched yesterday a mentoring program within the industry.
Oh,
because
wonderful.
yeah, a huge amount of people had called in, and it was just career advice they were looking for, and that thing of they don't want to be forced out of the industry and they want to look at how best to upskill and be guided as the industry returns. So we launched that yesterday, and it's, like I said, another element basically for people within the industry. So there's any amount of services there for people.
That sounds
with Minding
fantastic.
Creative Minds.
And just go onto the website, there's an overview of exactly what you do.
Yeah, just mindingcreativeminds.ie. All of the details are there, and we're continuously updating it with new information.
Olive, the final word goes to you. We're getting back to vaguely normal rock and roll business. How do you see the next year panning out, and what are you looking forward to?
I think it's exciting to think that for the creative industry that there's been so much pent up development happening, that people are bursting to explore what they've been trying to create over the past 18 months, and I think that's really going to improve that industry, and hopefully then those people can come to us in a year or two when they've made plans and they've budgeted, they've talked to Barry and they've got their budgeting organised, and they're ready then to have the conversation with the likes of Moneycube to talk about how to use that money that they've made.
One thing that struck me at Hot Press is that despite the lockdown, the creativity was incredible, and the amount of new artists that actually managed to embrace the Zoom gig and somehow make it work. So there are a lot of artists who a year and a half ago had no expectation of making a living in the industry, who are now going, I have a following,
yeah.
I've got gigs, oh my God, so there'll be a whole new crop, and you look forward to talking to them.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And Moneycube.ie is our website, but There's so many resources, I think, out there now for people that it's fantastic. There's a lot of opportunity for everyone.
It's been great talking. People can see that you're not like the dentists. You're nice. You're very approachable. I'd like to thank Kim O'Callaghan from MCD, Olive from Moneycube.ie, and Barry Downs from Livewire. This is but one of a suite of events for Pensions Awareness Week. The full programme is on pensionsawarenessweek.ie. Thanks again to Iconic for the amazing space, and thank you for watching. Cheerio.